I'm going to show you 3 ways to use drum samples in your mixes. Let's dig in. Right, let's get right into this, okay? Let's answer 2 questions. What are drum samples and should you use them in your mixes? So drum samples are pre-recorded samples or snapshots or audio pictures of a drum that you can either replace your existing drums with, or you can blend into your existing drums to change the sound. These could be what's called a one-shot sample, which is a single velocity sample, or a multi-layered sample, which kind of blends in with the velocity of the drums that it's replacing and sounds a little bit more natural. So should you be using drum samples in your mixes? Well, it's an interesting question, and it's a question that's had lots and lots of geeky debates online and in forums. Is it cheating? Does it mean that you can't record drums properly? Well, I'm going to give you a 2-word answer that might shock you. And that is, who cares? Before we get into this, I need you to like, subscribe, comment, turn on notifications, and you can also buy me a coffee in the link below. So honestly, I think this debate is really boring, and I just can't be bothered with it. There are people that believe it's wrong, there's people that believe it's cheating, there's people that believe if you're using samples it's because you're not capable as a mixer or as a recording engineer. And of course there's people out there that believe that it's ruining music and it wasn't how it was done in the old days and all that shit. But the bottom line is there's a lot of people out there that say it's cheating, and I'm just not interested. At the end of the day, the end user, i.e. the listener, doesn't care. Nobody ever says, I'm not going to go and see a band, I'm not going to buy a record, or I'm not going to stream a song because that band used samples. There may be 1 or 2 geeky people out there, but do you know what? Who cares? Samples have been around for years, and there's folks out there who decry samples, and they didn't realise that samples have been used in some of their favourite old school music that they love. This has been going on way longer than you think, and using genres that you wouldn't expect. I watched a video of Paul Simon talking about the mix of his album Graceland, and I was quite surprised to see that he was using samples in the song You Can Call Me Al, that beautiful classic old 80s song done the good old fashioned way. So if he can use samples in his music, then so can you. If using samples gets you closer to the finish line, squeezes an extra 10 or 20% out of your mix, and makes your client happy, then just do it. Who cares? So I'm going to talk you through 3 scenarios I use samples in, okay? And I'm going to let you hear the before, the after, and also the samples that I'm going to use. In all cases, I'm going to be using Slate's Trigger 2. Been using it for years. I think it's really great, super reliable, like it tracks really well. There are other ones out there that you can use. Waves has one, there's Drumagog, there's Massey DRT, blah, whatever you like, it's all good. And the samples that I'm going to be using are basically stuff that I've either found online, bought, or created myself. Alright, strap yourself in. Number 1, the genre-specific method. So certain genres, particularly metal, progressive metal, deathcore, all that kind of stuff, you need to have otherworldly drums. Like it or loathe it, it's the norm. If you're not doing this in your mixes, then unfortunately your mixes are not going to stand up to the competition. And I know that's going to be controversial. Comment below, because it's good for the algorithm. So in this example, I'm going to let you hear a modern metal drummer who's recorded this stuff himself, and he's recorded it in such a way that samples can be added easily. Without these samples, it just wouldn't sound right. These samples add that kind of otherworldly and yet artificial sort of vibe that's expected in this modern metal world. It is a cover, so I'm not going to play any of the music for it because I don't want to get hit with copyright, but you'll be able to hear right away the massive difference this makes in that particular genre. Let's check it out. Okay, so let's start off listening to this without any of the samples in place. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty uninspiring. However, it's definitely been recorded in such a way that samples can be added later. So let's bring the samples in. Same place. So they're otherworldly now. They're vastly different to how they started and absolutely necessary for this type of genre. Let's have a look at what we're doing with the samples. So with the kick drum, I'm using 3 separate samples. First sample, second sample, third sample, and they're all adding something ever so slightly different. This first one is definitely adding the meat. The second one is definitely adding some of the presence. And this one's just adding a little bit of kind of vibe, I guess, more than anything else. It was useful. And again, all together. So yeah, it sounds cool. Right, snares. So again, 3 different samples. Right, first sample. Fairly sort of straightforward sounding natural sort of drum. Second sample. Over the top, a little bit of reverb, a little bit of length. And this one is just adding a little bit of knock to it. And again, let's listen to all of them. Yeah, sounds massive. Toms. Okay, so the toms, we have 1 sample on it. And they're all from the same drum kit sample. And again, they sound really, really big. So let's listen to all the samples in. And again with all the samples out. So there's a massive difference here, and using samples like this in this genre of music is pretty essential. I could not make these drums sound that massive from the normal acoustic drums that I get. Like, this is absolutely essential. All right, next one. Number 2, the recordings are too shit to mix method. So sometimes as a mixer, I get sent drums to mix that are just not up to scratch. In extreme cases, these are unmixable. Maybe they've been badly recorded, maybe the drum kit wasn't very good, maybe the mics were rubbish, maybe the position, the room, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I can't mix them. But also, perhaps the drums that were captured aren't actually suitable for the music. And that is something that I come across as well. So in this case, what I tend to do is completely replace the drums with samples to give myself a better starting point. And when I do this, I tend to use natural sounding samples, a lot of them that I've created myself, because I want that natural starting point that basically makes the drums feel like they've been recorded well in the first place. Because shite in equals shite out. If the drums have been recorded well, then it's going to mix well. So if I can't get drums that are going to mix well, what I want to do is add samples to get it to that point. So this example is a bit of fun. It's actually the first ever recording I did over 20 years ago, and it's awful. I didn't know shit from shite back then. I used terrible mics in a bad rehearsal room and a drum kit that was completely beat up in positions that I didn't really understand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to completely replace the kick, the snare and the toms with natural sounding real samples that are multi-velocity, maybe mix in a little something else to give it a bit of spice. Let's check it out. Okay, 20 years back in time. So let's have a listen to how these sound on their own. Absolutely awful, basically. So again, forgive me, this was my first ever recording like over 20 years ago. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was using some pretty cheap gear in a pretty crappy room with a rehearsal room drum kit which was beaten to within an inch of its life. So let me bring in the samples and let you hear. So that is a much better starting point for me to mix from. Like, these sound like natural drums and I've chosen samples that can reflect that. Let's have a listen to the samples themselves. So on my kick drum, I've got this one here, which is something I recorded myself from a session. This was a band called The Meaning, and I quite like to sample drum kits when I'm recording. It's quite useful for loads of different things, including this kind of thing. Also, I put a one shot in here. So again, just kind of trying to add a little sort of extra vibe to it. Onto the snare. So I've got 2 snares. So again, I've got this snare that I recorded from the Meaning recording session. So again, I'm trying to kind of put something in there that is quite natural sounding, and then backing it up with this sample as well, which I got online ages ago. And again, that's a little bit more artificial, but it's still quite sort of natural sounding. And then the toms. So again, this is from a kit that I sampled in a recording session. It was my old band Anomalous. Like a lot of sessions, basically, I chose to sample the kit. And that's the other one there. So again, it sounds quite natural, which is quite good. So let's have a listen to it without the samples in again. And now with the samples. So that's an enormous difference and much more of a usable sort of tone. And the other thing that I've done here is I've quickly added some EQ and compression and sorted out some phase issues just to let you hear how it can actually sound. So let's bring these in and then we'll have a look at them. I mean, that sounds way better as a starting point. And just to show you what I've done in my channel strip, I've added a little bit high end on the kick, a little bit of low end of the kick, taken some mids out, touch of compression, also flipped to phase because it was out of phase with the overheads. On the snare, I've added a lot more high end there, bit of a filter, a little bit of mids to give it a bit of poke. And on my toms, a little bit high end, that's all, a little bit of a filter. Same on the other one. And on my overheads, a lot of low end taken out, a bit of high frequency added, and that's it. And again, it's made a huge difference. And again, this is much more of a starting point for me. And again, it is a little bit dry at the moment, but as a starting point, that is so much better than what I had before. So again, let's hear the raw sounds. And now with the sample and a little bit of EQ, touch of compression, and a bit of phase adjustment. Here we go. Yeah, that is much better place for me to be in. So hopefully you can see that that has made a massive difference to that, and it gives me a way better starting point. So let's look at the third and final method, the blending in samples to enhance or excite method. So this is actually my preferred method for using samples. What I like to do is I like to blend in a little bit of sample into the original sound to just give it that little something extra. Again, trying to squeeze an extra 10-20% out of it. Is it worth it? Absolutely. With this method you will hear the real drums predominantly, but with a little bit of that sample mixed underneath, just to give it something. Now, you might be surprised to hear the samples that I choose to use. Like on their own they kind of sound a bit weird, but in the context of the mix they add something that's missing, and that's super important. So check it out for yourself, let me know what you think. Here we go. Okay, so looking at this finished mix, we have a bunch of kicks, a bunch of snares, a bunch of different other drums. Let's have a listen to it without any samples involved. Alright, so it sounds pretty decent. This is a great drummer, and this was recorded in a great kit in a great studio, so it's got all the elements that I need. But I wanted to use some samples just to exaggerate the kick and snare. The toms I was fine with. It's really just the kick and snare that I wanted to blend some in. Now, the thing I'm doing slightly different on in this session is that I have a dedicated kick sample track and a dedicated snare sample track within my kick and snare buses. So let's have a listen to the samples on each. Here's the kick drum, and I'm using Trigger. So it's just a big fat one shot basically to add a little bit of low energy. I'm moving on to the snare next. So it's a really over the top kind of aggressive snare. So let's have a listen to how they sound. So So it's super subtle. Now, what I want to do is just draw your attention to like what's actually happening. Let's start with the kick drum. I'll have it bypassed, then I'll bring it in and out so you can hear the difference. It's just adding a little bit of low-end energy and excitement, and I really love it. All right, I'm going to do the same with the snare. I'm going to start with the sample off and then toggle it on and off so you can hear the difference. Again, it's super subtle, but it's adding a little something to that snare, which I really like. There's something a bit sharper about it, a bit more exciting about it. Let's listen again. And again, what we'll do is let's compare with no samples. And with the samples in now. I really love this. I think it sounds great, but it's adding that extra 10-20% that I need to get this across the line. Okay guys, I hope you found that interesting. The thing I want you to take away from this is, if you need to use samples, who cares? Just do it. Let's stop worrying about how we get to a great mix and just worry about getting a great mix. At the end of the day, the end user, the listener, the streamer, the artist, they're all going to be happy. It doesn't matter how you got there. And also, you'd be surprised to know that loads and loads of top producers and mixers across the world have been using this for years, so there's no reason why you can't do it yourself. Trigger's a great tool. There's lots and lots of samples out there that you can buy, that you can get. Just have a shot of it, okay? And you'll find that it really adds to your mixes, particularly if you're working in rock and metal. One method that I haven't talked about is that I always take samples of drum kits that I record, and I always do them multi-layered. Now, I do this for a couple of reasons. It can help if there's any sort of technical problems, but one of the advantages of doing this is it allows me to get a super clean and clear, punchy drum if the song requires it. When you're recording acoustic drums, there's a lot going on around it. If you need that really upfront, tight sounding drum, like making a sample yourself is super useful, and making it a multi-layered natural one of the kit that you're recording with the drummer that you're recording in the room that you're recording, but you can have them super upfront, super clean, super clear. It's really quite good actually. I've done it quite a number of times. However, if you want to see that and you want to hear how that sounds, you're going to need to comment below and tell me. And again, if you enjoyed this, please like, please subscribe. I love making these videos, I want to make more. And if you thought this was a game changer for you, buy me a coffee at the link below. I love coffee and it really helps me kind of grow.